the story, as we expected, is getting even more and more interesting. There's Luigi Mangione. They call this the booking photo. It's no longer a mugshot, but that's pretty much of a mugshot. They put him in that prison outfit. When he was arrested, he had a scarf on, and he looked as dashing as he did when he was charming the hostel worker and HOSTEL worker in New York. But the reports of his arrest were that he went, was in a McDonald's. He was on his laptop, and someone from the McDonald's crew there called the police. The police came very quickly. They sat down and talked to him, and they asked him if he had been in New York.
It's interesting how he didn't get rid of the physical evidence, allegedly, that he still had the gun and he had the writings about United Health. If I was listening to something earlier, an attorney was saying if he had managed to divest himself of all of this physical evidence, his lawyer would be able to make a better case. Like, oh yeah, you got the wrong guy. No, it just happens to look like him. But he's got all this stuff. Like, why did you not get rid of all of it?
Yeah, it's a strange thing. I mean, it seemed like it was this perfectly executed crime, and it really wasn't. I mean, he that's what made him seem most like the scion of a wealthy Baltimore family, is that he didn't really know what he was doing here. It seemed like he did. Like, people were talking about how he's a hitman and it was a perfect execution and he left. That we're going to find out that it wasn't. And we're going to find out that, that while he appears and has the biography of someone who you wouldn't expect to do this, something in Luigi Mangione broke over the past year. About 6 months ago, he stopped talking to family. He stopped talking to friends. He wasn't responding to emails and direct messages and texts. And so something broke, and that's going to be, these last 6 months are going to be the most telling part of what brought him to where he was. We can speculate, and there has been speculation. He lived in Hawaii for a time. He was part of a book club in Hawaii, and the book that he suggested people reading, and these are early reports, was Ted Kaczynski's manifesto. He was the Unabomber, and apparently Mangione did a review of that on Goodreads, the website Goodreads, at some point, and people, it sort of ended the book club because people were kind of weirded out by the fact that was what Luigi decided would be a good book to read.
In the Goodreads, in his review of it, he said stuff like, we can't condone what Kaczynski did and he deserves to be in jail. But you also, this from Mangione, he said you also can't, look away from why the Unabomber did what he did, why Kaczynski was moved and motivated, and his writings. You can't look away from that. Like, there's some truth in that. So it seems to me like that's kind of where he turned. But I was also reading an account from a friend, which kind of detailed his spinal injuries since he was a child. He'd had back trouble. And then he had the surfing incident when he was in Hawaii, and he tweaked his back, and he ended up having to go through surgery and had a bunch of pins in his back. And so he was suffering from medical issues. But what's interesting is he's from a wealthy family. He had a master's degree in engineering. This is not someone without, right? This is someone who has access to money, access to probably really good medical care. These aren't poor people or middle-class people that struggle to pay the bills. These aren't people that, this could break them. This probably wasn't going to break him. Yeah. So why he was moved to become the face of this, struggle against corporate greed is interesting.
Yeah, no, and not only that, I mean, you look at, just because he went to an Ivy League school, Ted Kaczynski graduated from Harvard. He had a PhD, I think, from either Michigan or Wisconsin. I think it was Michigan.
He went to University of Pennsylvania, I think.
No, I'm talking about Ted Kaczynski.
Oh, Kaczynski, my apologies. Yeah.
So these people, I mean, if you have a mental break of any kind, it doesn't look at your college resume, right? I mean, these are things that happen, and whether you feel wronged by corporate America or by the medical or insurance world, that's going to register, and that's what happened here with Mangione. So you understand why. Look, I think the most telling part, like I said, is the fact that he broke away from his family and friends. And he was somebody who was very close to his family and friends. He was also the valedictorian of his high school, which I think implies a good deal of popularity. He was in a fraternity that's a decent amount of popularity to get into that fraternity at the University of Pennsylvania. He was active in sports. He was in a book club, and there are pictures of him in Hawaii with a big group of people that were hanging out together, living in the same place, having that book club. The people that have given reports of who he was as recently as early in 2024, that there's a real break between that description and what we're hearing now in the writings and obviously the actions of this kid. And it's going to be an interesting several months as we learn more about him, and as the prosecutors in New York and Pennsylvania to a lesser extent work on prosecuting this case, because he does have public support, right? There are people that like him. There's going to have to be a jury of 12 people that hears, yeah, you may agree with his sentiments, but you cannot agree with his method, right? And that's the jury selection in that case is going to be really fascinating.
Can we talk about public support? Because so many people are so upset that this McDonald's worker turned him in that now there's this movement to give this particular McDonald's horrible reviews. As a matter of fact, that there's so many one-star Google reviews that now this McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania has a one-star review because so many people flocked to Google to make sure they ding it.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting.
There are a couple of parts of that conversation, which are who looks at reviews for McDonald's. I mean, who
exactly?
You're going to McDonald's, what McDonald's is, right? If you're not going there because the review. Let's Yelp this place, right? No, that's not what people do with McDonald's. So I don't think it matters. The other thing is what we call a movement today versus what a movement is very different. If 984 people or 3,612 people write a negative review of a restaurant because of what's going on, I think we pervert that into saying it's a movement and, oh my God, there's this groundswell and public opinion and yada yada. I think it's interesting that we're seeing and hearing from people who are sympathetic to murder, because that's
Right.
unusual and it brings up these conversations. But I don't think that there's. I think that we have to be careful in saying that that's what's sweeping the nation, is this feeling of sympathy for this kid. I think, though, that there is a massive amount of sympathy that sort of distinguishes this event from others that have happened, no question. And people say that it's shining a light on a huge problem. I agree with that. It's really true. But it's still, like, I'm always dubious in this age of the comment section and this age of social media of what really means a movement. I mean, if there was no social media right now, there would still be people talking about, that guy had it coming. He was the head of United Healthcare, and they deny all this coverage. And we would talk about it as we talked about it earlier. I agree, times have changed, but I don't think that means that is reflective of the sentiment all across the board. Doesn't mean it's not either. It just doesn't prove it to me.
I don't know how we can be desensitized to murder, a brazen murder where someone's shot on the street, and have corporate greed be more important than human life, the taking of a human life.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think we are. That's why I'm saying, like, en masse, I don't think we are. I do think that people are, smart people and people who feel this, the hurt of the insurance industry and how we have Medicaid, how we have medical care in this country. I think that they are that they're having conversations they wouldn't ordinarily have during a murder.
And I know you've been looking into some of his digital footprint as part of the evidence that police have collected, including some writings on a website called Goodreads, book reviews, where he reportedly reviewed the Kaczynski Unabomber manifesto. What did that say?
Well, that's exactly right. So there's a whole host of things that investigators right now that they have time, right? So the focus the last 5-6 days has been on who is this person? Can we get them? Well, that's now solved, and this individual's been charged. So they have the advantage to go back and say, okay, now that we know who it is, what's their online footprint? And exactly to your point, they've got all sorts of information that he has posted online before, or it is sometimes even more helpful. What are their accounts? What are the things that they're reading? And what are they opining on? And in this particular instance, he's talking about the Unabomber and his thoughts on the Unabomber. So that's one of the things that they're looking into as they try to make sure, is this in fact his account? And then what does this mean? Does it help us with motive, or does it help us understand? And could we be looking at other people in the future that want to do what he wants to do? And one of those things that they've been looking at also is a photo of a spine that has screws in it. And so is that his spine? Was that somebody else's spine? Is that another type of thing that could have helped fuel this? So I think when we look at this, it's going to take a while to sort through all of that. That work we know is ongoing, and we're reporting that. So we're just going to have to see, I think, in the coming couple of days where this all goes. One of the downsides of him being in the New York court system is that they typically don't put a lot of that information in their charging documents. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge for us. Normally, if this was in the federal system, even in Pennsylvania, we might get a lot more information as far as what they were uncovering as it pertains to motive, should they want to introduce that in the charges in New York State. Unfortunately, just the way that the law is, has nothing to do with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. It's going to be a challenge.
And Clint, the New York Times actually has some additional reporting on this spinal X-ray that's been circulating online, or at least related potentially to that. And here's what they report out. Mangione was in regular contact with friends and family until about 6 months ago, when he suddenly and inexplicably stopped communicating with them. He had been suffering from a painful back injury, friends said, and then went dark. A friend told the New York Times that his spine was kind of misaligned, and quote, he said his lower vertebrae were almost like a ½ inch off, and I think it pinched a nerve, end quote. How significant is this?
I think it's quite significant for two reasons. One, it may point to motive and why United Health, why this direction. Even if you look at the other evidence that might be out there in the open source, nothing really points to healthcare. So that's one dimension of it that might be looked at. The other is the dimension that Catherine was talking about, which is what was his mental health status? If he's in persistent pain, would that contribute to this, or maybe put him in a different psychological state?
And I
thought that was kind of an interesting take on it. His grandfather, by the way, is very, very wealthy. And talking about, someone who had every opportunity in life, he's the heir to this fortune where the grandfather owns a resort hotel, a radio station, some other businesses as well. His sister went to Vanderbilt Medical School, and she's a resident at the University of Texas Medical Center. So he's got, he comes from a very prominent family.
Yeah. And again, I think this is all about the break. This is, and the other part of this is back pain. They were just talking about it, right? I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with being wealthy, and there's nothing wrong with growing up well. If that's what happened. It sounds like his grandfather was Sicilian and worked his way up from the bottom and created his own fortune, which is always admirable. But then there's if he's got this excruciating back pain. I fortunately never have had that. People say pain like that is, and that's allegedly that we just saw there an X-ray that was taken with pins in his back. He had misaligned vertebrae, and when that pain can make you delusional. It can make you think differently than you ordinarily would, or were raised to think and behave. So it could go to that. I mean, the judge yesterday at his arraignment asked him if he had any mental illness or drug use, and Mangione replied no, not that are significant or not that apply here, or not that are worth mentioning. I'm not sure exactly what the verbatim on that was, but the point is that he is somebody who could have just cracked because of this pain, and it created an irrationality, and who do you go after? You go after the healthcare industry, and you're already somebody who is a little bit upset with corporate America, and that it's like the perfect stew. I'm sure that is what they are going to argue in their defense, is that he was somebody who did this because of that, because of the pain just made him irrational. And
Yeah.
But it also could be that irrationale is what made him do the final act, but he was perfectly within his own capacities and just damn angry at the way healthcare is perpetrated in this country, which is fine and believable and understandable and not at all delusional. But I do think that when you take it to the level of murdering someone, it's gone to a place that something else carried it there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting case, and it's something we'll be following as it goes along. And I think, though, that we talked about collectively corporate greed and being, especially with the whole Trump campaign and billionaires taking over and America now having a new class of oligarchs. But
Right.
this case seems to be, I don't know if it's opened kind of a wound and has let everything really come out. And I don't know if it's going to be something that is the catalyst for the middle class really rising up and calling foul on what's happening.
Yeah, it's starting a conversation, and it's a conversation that wouldn't have started without it, because it didn't, right? I don't think many of us knew that 33% of claims made at United Healthcare were denied. I certainly didn't know it, and I read the news a lot.
I didn't know they were using AI to deny claims. I had
Yeah,
no idea.
well, I didn't know that either. And so in that sense, it did start a conversation. I think, I'm an optimistic person, so I think it's a conversation that's going to be impactful. And I think it's going to be part of the next conversation we have about Medicare for all, or some kind of socialized medicine in this country that goes beyond what Obamacare did, which Obamacare is totally flawed, but it's a lot better than it is a big step in the right direction. And I will argue that with anyone who says, no, it was a Band-Aid or whatnot. No, I mean, that's how progress happens, sometimes incrementally. And I think that was a big increment. And I think you got, and now you have more people covered, so that they're not going to want that taken away. They're going to want more coverage. And so, yeah, I totally think this started a conversation. I think we talked about it yesterday, Kim, is this whole idea of a horrible crime having a silver lining, and that silver lining may be that we talk about this and more people are educated about it. And when more people know and are educated, that's when change happens, historically.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell, you'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.